German Chancellor candidate Friedrich Merz has proposed strengthening Germany's own military while also opening negotiations with the UK and France to expand their nuclear support for other European countries. He argues that Germany should not rely entirely on the US nuclear umbrella for protection.
I strongly welcome the fact that the UK is once again seeking closer ties with Europe and the European Union. I still hope we can convince the Americans that it is in our shared interest to maintain strong transatlantic relations. I continue to hope we can preserve them.
According to The Telegraph, France has expressed readiness to deploy its nuclear deterrence capabilities to help defend Europe. This could involve stationing nuclear-armed fighter jets in Germany. Such discussions have gained traction following US statements about a potential troop withdrawal from the continent. During the Munich Security Conference on February 14, US Vice President J.D. Vance criticized the state of democracy in EU countries and signaled that Europe could no longer take unconditional American support for granted. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, speaking at his press conference Ukraine the Year 2025, once again emphasized the urgent need for a unified European armed forces. According to Zelenskyy, Europe must be self-reliant, given the ongoing threat from Russia and the uncertainty surrounding US support.
I believe there are weaknesses in Europe's security. This isn't about one specific country, it's a broader issue. All these vulnerabilities were first seen in Ukraine. Because of the war, we have taken significant steps. We increased production, strengthened our military. Our army now numbers 800,000 troops. Yes, we had to do this due to tragedy. Europeans must also strengthen their defense capabilities and invest resources in their own security, because they need to rely on themselves.
As a first step toward a unified European army, Zelenskyy has proposed Ukraine as a unifying platform for European defense cooperation. He described this not as an experiment but as a crucial security pilot project.
This contingent could be based in Ukraine. We would all work together. We would develop strategies, exchange technological and drone knowledge. Those who need it would receive training in ground combat and in dealing with a highly technological enemy. All of this is essential for security. It ensures peace of mind for everyone. I believe that today, Ukraine is the real example. I believe that today, there is a real desire to provide Ukraine with security guarantees and to end the active phase of this war. And this example could serve as the foundation for building a European armed force. Even if no new legal framework exists yet, it can still be created based on the contingent.
At a joint meeting between the European Commission and the Ukrainian government in Kyiv on February 24th, European Commissioner for Defense Andrius Kubilius stated that Europe's common goal is security peace for Ukraine through strength.
To look for possibilities to improve supply of components and raw materials, very much important for defense industry of Ukraine, including nitrocellulose. Second, to look into possibilities how we can assist for development of joint projects of Ukrainian defense industry with European defense companies. And third one, development of common capability targets and flagships in order really to include Ukrainian needs into our planning process.
Kubilius also identified a fourth point: using existing EU defense industrial programs to benefit Ukraine. The need for Europe to take charge of its own security was also emphasized by Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala in a special speech marking the third anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
We must significantly increase defense spending to 3% of GDP within the next few years. The international order is undergoing its most profound transformation since the fall of communism. This does not mean that the United States is no longer our ally. Petr Fiala, Prime Minister of the Czech Republic, in a special speech on the third anniversary of Russia's war against Ukraine.
Despite these discussions, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelenskyy remains convinced that NATO remains the simplest and most reliable way to guarantee security for both Ukraine and Europe as a whole. However, if NATO membership remains out of reach for Ukraine, he argues that the only option left is to build NATO within Ukraine itself. Reported by Serhiy Kulas, Yulia Granovskaya, UATV News.
The president of France called on allies to make strategic decisions to defend Europe. He also proposed introducing joint European funding to increase arms purchases and production. Emmanuel Macron is convinced that it will be difficult for Europe to have a unified army. However, he believes it is possible to create shared defense capabilities. Otherwise, he argues, Europe will not be able to become more autonomous.
As Europeans, we must increase our military efforts. We, the French, have a strong army, the most effective in Europe. We will need to strengthen our defense and our security. In the coming weeks, I want to organize a large-scale European funding initiative to increase defense procurement and production.
France must also increase its defense budget share, President Macron is convinced. During a meeting with parliamentary factions and groups, he suggested that the National Assembly, the country's parliament, consider increasing defense spending to 5% of gross domestic product. He reminded them that in the 60s, 70s and 80s, during the Cold War, France had similar levels of defense spending. However, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, investments were reduced. Today, France spends about 2% of its gross domestic product on defense.
The time is coming when we will have to invest even more, both in France and across Europe, to strengthen our defense and security. I'm not sure if 5% is the right figure for France, but in any case, we will have to raise these expenses. I do not rule out launching a savings mechanism. We are entering an era where each of us should ask ourselves, what can we do for the French nation and the Republic? In this sense, such a savings mechanism would be a very good idea.
In recent days, Emmanuel Macron has had numerous conversations with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The two leaders have coordinated their diplomatic efforts for the immediate future.
During the conversation, the presidents of Ukraine and France shared details of their contacts with other world leaders and coordinated positions, joint plans, and next steps. Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Emmanuel Macron also discussed in detail the views on security guarantees. From a publication on the website of the Office of the President of Ukraine,
in particular, the leaders discussed preparations for Emmanuel Macron's visit to Washington. According to the French president, he intends to meet with Donald Trump and urge him to be weak in the face of Putin, as this is not in Washington's interest. How can you be authoritative in the face of China then? Macron asked.
He, Macron, will come to the United States to speak for the Europeans and to say that Ukraine's future cannot be decided without them. Benjamin Haddad, the Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France, from a publication in Le Figaro.
The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, is also preparing to visit Washington. Information about the upcoming visits of Macron and Starmer was confirmed by the White House. They stated that the leaders of France and the UK would visit the United States separately, and the dates for their visits have been set.
And next Monday, the President will host France's President Emmanuel Macron. And on Thursday, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer will visit the White House as well.
According to The Telegraph, the Prime Minister of the UK will urge Donald Trump to keep American fighter jets and missiles ready in Europe in case Russia violates the terms of any potential ceasefire. Additionally, Starmer is expected to bring the United States a strategy for deploying European troops in Ukraine.
Sir Keir Starmer will present Donald Trump with a plan to send fewer than 30,000 European troops to Ukraine in an attempt to secure American protection for the deployment. The Prime Minister is expected to detail how European forces could police any ceasefire deal brokered by the U.S. President when the pair meet in Washington next week, from a publication in The Telegraph.
The question of a peacekeeping mission in Ukraine is also being considered in Paris. According to Emmanuel Macron, France would likely be willing to send troops to guarantee peace only if it's achieved through negotiations. Reported by Alexandra Zaslavets, Valeria Nikipelova, UATV News.